Hey everybody, great Friday to you. As promised, I am back a little later than, just a little later than I thought that I would be, but I am here nonetheless. And I thought, well, I'll talk more about the lawsuit, or I'll talk about the upcoming Jaguars game. And then I thought, there's the Heisman tomorrow, where Joe Burrow's a lock to get the Heisman, and I think was going to be a great NFL quarterback, but I want to see how he does against Oklahoma. And then, of course, Cal's playing in the Red Box Bowl. Go Bears. And I've got a play that I'm not going to reveal to you, but it's done. And there's a certain person I got to tell it exists. But I was thinking about all of this, but I can't come back. I can't help but come back to one fact that really put in my mind initially that I should start my own media company. And prior to that is because I felt it necessary to take upon the practice of recording and putting out what I had done in trying to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland. Because if I didn't, the local media was hell bent on not doing anything to have anybody remember what Oakland almost did or tried to do, and let alone what I did. For example, my friend Mike Silver, who I've known since we were at Cal, and he was 18 and I was 22, um, was at the NFL Spring League meeting, and South Castaneda of KTV was there, and immediately thought, well, he'll get him on camera. But even though I was helping the mayor on issues and there's a lot I could talk about, and I was there, Sal basically said hello and acted like I didn't exist. But it was more like, to be blunt, like a white media person to a white media person. That's not Sil's fault, because Phil likes to get on camera. That's what he does, right? But so do I. But my whole point is that the questions that he asked Silver were questions I knew the answer to, and yet he didn't even come back and say, "Hey, Zenny, let you get you on." And I actually said that to him. I gave him a chance to come back, and I thought, you know what? This kind of institutional racism is going to be quite literally the death of me if I don't do something about it. And that's why I started what now is 98 blogs, several hundred social media platforms, because, and I'm saying this to anybody out there who's marginalized from media, and generally those folks are black, okay? You need to start your own media efforts, and you need to join with other people. I'm not going to go on a long diatribe about it, but that's true for everybody. If you are out there and you feel like you have an alternative idea, a legal one, right? One that's good for society, and you're not being heard, this is a perfect time to get your own media platform out there and make it happen. So, and I say all that because of the simple fact that Monty Poole, my friend who's now with NBC, we're not as friends like we used to be. Whatever happened with Monty, that's Monty, but because I don't know. But all I know is that when he was with the Oakland Tribune as staff writer, he was the lone media person that took it upon himself to write this a piece called Super Bowl 29 should have been in Oakland. Super Bowl 29 was the 2005 Super Bowl, and he helped me on my original Super Bowl bid group along with Mike Silver. But what happened was that the Oakland Tribune failed to keep up that web page, and it kept getting buried, and the page was actually taking on the appearance as if someone was literally trying to make it so that it wouldn't come up high in search anymore. It was devalued, right? And I looked at that because I tried to find it in search and couldn't after being able to find it. And I thought, wow. So what I did when I started Sports Business Simulations, my first company, I started this page. I took what he wrote and put it here because I felt that the Tribune was hell bent on burying what I had done. Okay. Super Bowl 29 should have been in Oakland by Monty Poole. staff writer, Oakland Tribune. And I say all that, I write all that to say this. Why? What's the relevance here? I'll tell you. When the Raiders eventually do leave, I will remain the only person in NFL history and in Oakland history to have formed a bid to try and bring the Super Bowl to Oakland. No one else before me or since has ever done it. Ever. And for those of you who don't know, you would say, okay, what does that entail? I learned everything right and everything wrong with the Oakland Coliseum. Everything. And that's why I'm here to tell you today that tearing down the Coliseum Stadium would be a massive mistake. I mean, gigantic. It has, from a structural perspective, more going for it than even many modern stadiums. But I want to read this to you because regardless, and I'm happy to answer your questions or anything about anything, right? But I don't want people to forget this. Hey, welcome to Zenny62. And this is what Monty wrote way back in, I believe that he wrote this originally in 2005, just before the Philadelphia Eagles and the Patriots are going to play in the Super Bowl that would have been in Oakland had we won the bid. I'll read this and I'll explain why we lost, and also why my experience is a microcosm of why Oakland loses its sports teams and why Oakland allows its sports organizations to treat it inappropriately, which is what the Raiders have done. Okay? This is Monty Poole writing this. For the next 8 days, Jacksonville, the Florida city unable to be Miami, Tampa, or Orlando, will host Super Bowl 39, excuse me, I said 29, Super Bowl 39, thus making it its first attempt to hog the international spotlight. It's an opportunity for the NFL to see Jacksonville's act in the clutch, an opportunity that was sought by Oakland and could have gone to Oakland. One man, Zenny Abraham, who attempted to facilitate a deal to bring Super Bowl 39 to Network Associates Coliseum, insists it could have gone to Oakland. Yes, in capital letters, Abraham said, we could have kicked ass. Now the CEO of Sports Business Simulations, Abraham spent 5 years working for the city of Oakland, the last 2 as an advisor for the city's Community and Economic Development Agency, CEDA, where he reported to Robert Bobb, then the city manager. And I might add, for those of you who are wondering why you may have heard that name, Robert Bobb was the same person to help bring the Montreal Expos to Washington, D.C., where they became the Washington Nationals, and then, yes, the eventual World Series champion. For nearly 2 years, beginning in late 1998, this is Monty writing this, Abraham's crusade was to bring a Super Bowl to Oakland, which stepped in when it became apparent San Francisco might not get a new stadium and certainly wouldn't by 2005. With several local media representatives, including myself, serving as consultants, Abraham chaired meetings and maintained dialogue with NFL officials who oversee the Super Bowl. After several presentations to league executives and NFL owners, Oakland was one of 3 finalists bidding for the 2005 game. Miami and Jacksonville were the others. At a November 1st NFL owners meeting in Atlanta, the Oakland delegation, Bob, Abraham, Mayor Jerry Brown, now the former California governor, Alameda County Supervisor Gail Steele, this paper's former publisher P. Scott McKibben, name sound familiar, and others, received the news of its second ballot elimination. What went wrong for Oakland? The predictable. It was undermined by its eternally volatile mix of politics and sports. While Oakland could match or exceed Jacksonville in most significant categories, funding, facilities, access hotel room climate, it was undone by Mayor Brown's lack of commitment, as well as the acrimonious relationship between the Raiders and Alameda County. Does that sound familiar? Brown was 10 minutes late for a scheduled 2-hour meeting in NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue's New York office and left more than an hour early, Abraham said, leaving a newspaper publisher to sell the mayor's city and the rest of the Bay Area. That was McKibben. 2 league owners informed the Oakland delegation that it was, quote, hurt by some of the legal stuff, unquote, and Davis' relationship with the league and fellow owners, Abraham said. While the Bay Area offers 3 major airports and more than twice the minimum hotel room requirement, there were hurdles. The cooperation of San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, as requested by the NFL, was a challenge. He seemed to consider an Oakland-hosted Super Bowl a threat to future opportunities for San Francisco. And a note, San Francisco eventually did land its Super Bowl, the 50th Super Bowl. Why? Because it did what I told Willie Brown they would have to do to get a Super Bowl: build a new stadium. The Coliseum required an 8,000-seat expansion, which was conceivable. Various sites in Oakland and San Francisco needed to be secured to host scores of league-related events. While the Bay Area has hosted only 1 Super Bowl in January of 1985, Oakland has since been home to 3 World Series, a baseball All-Star game, and an NBA All-Star game. In other words, the Bay Area has more experience than most regions for a major sports event. And it's far better equipped than Jacksonville, which is straining under the pressure even before 100,000 convened this week. 6 cruise ships, one of which barely passed its sanitation inspection, are being used to meet the hotel room requirement. Some visitors are being asked to bunk in Daytona Beach, 90 miles south. Prices are astronomical. That would never happen here, Abraham said. If Jacksonville can't get its act together, and more horror stories emerge this week, the NFL may never return. Newsflash, it hasn't. For the moment, though, Jacksonville is on stage, having outstood Oakland and Miami 51 months ago. Why Jacksonville? Because the NFL rewards owners who play ball and cities that hustle. And because its team owner, the Jaguars' Wayne Weaver, now it's Shad Khan, and local politicians worked aggressively and in harmony to lure the game. Quote, one thing that stuck with me in hearing one of the NFL people say that the mayor must work in concert with the team owner, Abraham said. They should enter meetings and make presentations essentially hand in hand. Fat chance of that in Oakland, is Monty Poole writing it. We are cursed with politicians on one side of the room and Raiders executives on the roof. They'd sooner slap each other than make eye contact. Someday, some way, the Bay Area will host another Super Bowl. It did. If Jacksonville, one of the most sparsely populated areas, 1.2 million, in the NFL can get one, why not Oakland? If Detroit, which opened Ford Field in 2002, is considered deserving of a Super Bowl, why not Oakland? Quote, the Super Bowl can still be gotten if we get our political act together, Abraham insisted. There's got to be cooperation in the Bay Area, and they have to go after it aggressively. Is San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom the guy to get it going? Maybe. But the next mayor of Oakland will have an incredible opportunity. This is Poole. Meanwhile, Jacksonville is on the clock. For the city Floridians derisively referred to as being in, quote, South Georgia, unquote, it's a chance to step out of the shadows of its more inviting and glamorous neighbors. A chance blown by the Bay Area, even if it was a long shot. So that's what for me will be the eternally classic and great piece that Monty Poole wrote, and for which I will always be thankful. because it's the only post effort during 2005 Super Bowl media account that was ever written. And encapsulated within it are the seeds of where we are today. How many things that I said sound familiar? The acrimony between the Raiders and the politicians and Oakland not believing in itself. Think about that. That was written in 2005, but it was referring to the events of 1999 to 2001. There's something in Oakland's DNA which prevents it from taking control of its future and moving forward. It's always hoping for some outside force to advance it. And when people like either myself or my buddy Phil Tagami work to try to improve Oakland, we get as much hell, arguably more hell, than any heaven we would ever see. And we're not the only ones. Oakland has to have a come to Jesus meeting with itself. And that's up to the mayor to do. The mayor must stop, focus, and take a jack, bull, determined energy toward the resolution of Oakland's #1 problem. It's low self-esteem. She can't change it by changing the population. She can't change it by overpricing people out of Oakland. It's only creating more homeless people. She can't change it by hoping that Oakland has more cops on the beat or more money for police. All of those efforts have been proven time and again to be ineffective. What she has to do is pay attention to those who have not been paid attention to and make sure that minority and women-owned businesses get the funds they need, not rely on some startup like Kiva to do it alone, but get back to making government work to do it itself. In short, Libby has to bite the bullet and make government better. She hasn't done that. Arguably, she's made it worse. She's made a government where a former Oakland council member, African American, walks in with a justified argument regarding a permit for a simple little tent he's trying to build in his own backyard and gets arrested simply for asking questions. That is no joke. That is precisely what happened to Wilson Riles approximately 2 months ago. Oakland must do better. And this is on Libby's time, and it is placed precisely and firmly in her lap. It's not a matter of council members or staff. Everyone takes their cues from the mayor of Oakland, as well they should, positively or negatively. Oakland can do better. But Oakland needs to have a come to Jesus meeting with itself. And that meeting must start with the mayor of Oakland. And I will continue. Now, let me get to your comments. Smooth J says, Warriors leave Oakland, Raiders leave Oakland. Raider Lou, how you doing, buddy? Raider Lou says, one of my last Uber rides tonight, I picked up a couple of Raider fans in San Mateo, that flew all the way up from Delaware for Sunday's game. One of the gentlemen has never experienced a game in Oakland. Wow. That's going to be an incredible sight. I'll have somebody there vlogging, but it's still very difficult for me to think that that's the last one. I say difficult because it's not a matter of hanging on or anything. It's just a matter of problems with the stadium. That's it. Okay? That's it. I am not one who is disgruntled because, contrary to the words of Rich Vallata at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, who I have to say could approach this better, and he could give, and the Review-Journal could give Las Vegans a clearer and better picture of the Raiders in Oakland as they come to Las Vegas. But instead, he has taken up this sort of, burn the village mentality, as if people like myself did absolutely nothing, as if Oakland never tried to go after a Super Bowl. There is so much to learn because it is, regardless of whether he wants to admit it or not, part of the Raiders' history. Why the Raiders have not succeeded in Oakland is, and also why the Raiders have, is as much a part of the Raiders' history, if not more, than it ever will be in Las Vegas. Because it's these origins that will never be erased. For example, for all of the political rancor between the Raiders and the city of Oakland and the county of Alameda and what came to be called the East Bay entities during the first set of lawsuits, what was it that made the Raiders work in Oakland? I can answer that with one word. I only need one word to do so. Family. For all of its big city dreams, Oakland is a small town. Even as it adds more housing, as it becomes more dense in its population, Oakland, because of its topography and because of its history, will always be, at its heart, a small town. It's a place where it's very easy to get to know people. It's very easy to figure out who's running what. It's very easy to find your place. It's a cool town. It really is. So within that, and because everybody knows each other, particularly during the time before the smartphone and when Oakland was smaller and safer in terms of someone going out and being a Raider in public and having fun, you didn't have to worry about something called social media getting you into trouble. And the media were more respectful and not as so willing to create what we now call viral videos because during the 70s, such things rarely existed. So you could have a Ken Stabler carousing in Joe Scomas, womanizing, or John Matuzak smoking ganja. No one said anything to the wiser about it. And John Matuzak was 7'2" tall. Okay. It was a human time. And so intense because of that fact that Oakland was this place, not San Francisco. And when you were in Oakland, you took pride in it because you knew and know how great Oakland is, but people outside of Oakland, particularly those who lived in San Francisco, viewed it as the city they never wanted to go to. And when you drill down, and it didn't take much effort to do so, as to why, it's because Oakland was predominantly black. That's why. And for much of its post-war history, thanks to Henry J. Kaiser building a shipbuilding effort in Oakland and also a fantastic medical effort, which has become Kaiser Permanente, African Americans were migrated from the South to the West, settled in Oakland, and developed many very large families over time. Families that came to define life in Oakland for many of the years that I've lived in Oakland. A number of those families have unfortunately passed away or moved out because of the cost. It's a sad story, not entirely told and not well told at all. So within this, when it was active, you had people like the late Gene Upshaw, his brother Marvin Upshaw, George Atkinson, and many other Raider greats, including the great Clem Daniels, who had this great bar called the End Zone, were pillars of Oakland society. You had people going to great places to hang out like King's X Bar on 41st and Piedmont Avenue, which is now called the Kona. But you also have people going to places like the Alley, which is still there, 3325 Grand Avenue. I'm a regular there. You had a number of great places to go, a number of places that now are gone. There's still places like Heinholz's First and Last Chance. There's also Merchants Bar down in Jack London. And where there weren't bars, there are places to go to just, hey, to see each other, like Warriors games, okay? Or A's games. And then you might see these guys, and you buy popcorn from them, and then later in life you watch a comedy on TV and say, hey, who's that guy? What's his name? Tom Hanks. Wait a minute, didn't I see him at the Coliseum, you know, selling popcorn and everything? Didn't he sell something to my uncle? Yeah, you know, that's Oakland, okay? So when you hear people talk lovingly about the Raiders, that's really where that comes from. And so when the Raiders won the first Super Bowl against the Minnesota Vikings 32-17 in Super Bowl 11, it was as much a coronation of Oakland culture as it was a coronation of the Raiders as Super Bowl champion. It was a beautiful thing. I remember the year before, 2 years before, I knew nothing about football. Didn't care. Why? Because, to be blunt, at 6 years old, I said, hey, you know what? You got all these folks out there coaching, but none of them were black. I was 6 because my grandfather said, oh, you should go and play football. And I said, I don't want to. How come there isn't anyone black that's coaching? I was 6 years old when I made that observation. All right? So for me, as a guy who fancied himself as an intellectual who's black, right? As a kid, all right? I had no interest in football. Then, really, I didn't. Then, my mom had befriended Otis Sistrunk. I had not ever heard of him. And she said, hey, I want you to come and meet Mr. Sistrunk. I did. And I was into Nikons. I had a Nikon FM, Nikon camera. And I was into Nikons and Star Trek. 2 things that Otis knew nothing about. So I figured, you know, if I'm going to have to get along with this man, I should at least learn something about him. So I found this book called The NFL's Encyclopedic History of Pro Football, and Otis was in it. But I also found another section on, it's called A Strategic History of Pro Football. And it featured a subsection on Tom Landry and how he brought feedback and control theory to football in the form of the design of something called the flex defense. And me being interested in engineering and physics and basically in love with the idea of what's called systems thinking, I was hooked. I was hooked. So for me, my brand of football was always a mixture of Raider family and Dallas Cowboys computerization. I was a fan of both. And that was how I got interested in, I drew football plays. I went out for football at Skyline High and under Tony Fardella in 1979. And he asked, I went out for quarterback, and then defense I really didn't care about much, but I wound up at strong safety. And the defense we were in was a kind of a hybrid cover 1. My assignment, if you were in split backs formation and the strong safety was here and this was the tight end, was the tight end. However, if the fullback came out, I was told to go after the fullback and the linebacker was going to cover the tight end. So, on a particular play, the fullback stayed in. And so what I did was, since the fullback and the tight end stayed in, I changed my own assignment. You know what I did? I went and I double covered the wide receiver. It wasn't in plans. I actually basically recoded Fardella's defense. He didn't like that, but it worked. The next play, they had the fullback coming out. And so what I did was I planned a hybrid. I went out and made it look like, knowing that the tight end was going to, I made a deal with the middle linebacker to make sure he covered the tight end. I went over and made it look like I was going to double the flanker, and then I dropped down to cover the fullback really quick. And all I heard was, Abraham, what are you doing? And I told him, and And so he made me a deal that as I look back on it now, I was really a fool to take. But hey, I was a kid, didn't know. I made a deal to be a equipment manager. Folks, I'm telling you something. Do not ever volunteer to be equipment manager for your football team. I don't care if you wanted to meet the hot cheerleader, which I did. I don't care if you wanted to get your plays in, which I did. And my best play went for 36 yards and a touchdown against Fremont High. Ha! Take that, Fremont. I designed it. I was 16 years old. So that was my birth. But that was my foray into football. But in all this was the Oakland Raiders. Because Fardelli used to refer to, when he was coaching, he would say, well, we're going to run this play like the Raiders do. We're going to do this like the Raiders do. Because you're all impressionable, right? But it's easy when you have the team in your backyard, part of your society, part of the fabric of what you experience. And so even if you cared parenthetically about the Raiders, you knew that it pretty much made sense that teams like Skyline and Oakland High and all the other teams are going to borrow what they did from the Raiders to some degree, if not the whole doggone thing or as much as they could. And then what great icing on the cake it was to have Raiders come to the practice, give speeches, and just in general fire you up and let you know that what you did mattered from a football perspective. Those are the Raiders, okay? That's what they did. And then if they weren't doing that, they were giving to people, families. Al Davis was known for being very charitable. And the Raiders were known for that all the way up until they discovered Las Vegas and were going to be mad at the city and turned their back on a lot of charitable efforts that they were known for. However, having said that, I have to give Mark Davis a gigantic well of credit for giving $250,000 to Oakland schools last year to help them in a sports deficit situation. That was just a mere smidgen of what the Raiders used to do, okay? And they're going to bring to Las Vegas, and it's a big loss to the community. It's huge. So when you're out there, you're thinking, what's this thing? What do Raiders bring? They bring family, especially in a smaller town. And in a 21st century internet environment, you can engineer that too, right? So we're losing a lot. I'm not going to kid you. We're losing a lot. And it's really taken for granted in a society that I think has people that they don't really quite get what we have experienced and what we're capable of having, okay? And yeah, do I say in the next breath that includes elected officials? Absolutely. But on the other hand, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, the Raiders got to a point where they weren't treating us right. And as I said to a council member, I'm not going to say who, about 3 months ago, I said, how come we have to have, when it comes to sports organizations, we have to have these personal relationships with these organizations? Because this person asked me about another sports professional and said, what do you think of that person? And I said, well, I don't think that should be the question. The question is, how are we helping that person achieve their objectives? And are their objectives right for what we want to do? We have to handle them just like we'd handle any other valuable company that has a net positive to give to our community. We don't do that. We don't do that, okay? Now, the reasons why we haven't done it are because of the Raiders and their own behavior. The Raiders have acted like, toward the city, hey, it's like this. We don't quite know what kind of stadium we need, but we know that you're supposed to help us get it. Well, that doesn't work. It's kind of like dating You ever date someone? You ever date a woman that uh, it's like you try to please her, but she doesn't quite know what she wants because her self esteem isn't quite there, and so you find yourself quite literally jumping through hoops to make her happy, and nothing works. That what I just presented to you describes the relationship of the Raiders in the city of Oakland and the county of Alameda. Okay. Now I'll get to your comments. Um, and Raider Lou says, I told them I didn't think it would be the last, but they didn't want to believe me. Hey, Juan Ramirez, how you doing? Raider Lou says, East Bay Sports equals 11 world championships. San Francisco equals 8 world championships. Eric Young, how you doing? Mr. C Hardcore Sports says, isn't that donation from the Raiders a part of the lease? Don't they have to do it? Well, no, it's not something that, let me put it this way. The way the release discussions were going, it could just as easily have not happened. Okay, so no, uh, not at all. And I'll say this, and I'm going to give Mark props here. Mark is such that if you approach or ask him something, you put him in the position where you need him. In most cases, he will respond. And a lot of the relationship between Mark Davis and the city, from the city's part, is about what Mark perceives as a lack of respect. However, Mark, in a sense, turned the disrespect part back to Oakland in the example of his relationship poor with Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf. All right. But again, the simple fact that I had to say that points to the simple fact that all these relationships are unnecessarily personal as opposed to professional. And I will say this again. If we had, and this is not any criticism of Mark Bedane, but it is a fact, just by a lot of differences, most notably gender. If Amy Trask were Raiders CEO and she were allowed to remain as such, the Raiders would have been in Oakland. Okay? Because of the relationship that I believe that Amy and Libby would have formed, that would have been the stuff of story, particularly media coverage. And they would had all kinds of nicknames about their relationship and everything. And that stadium would have gotten done. It would have been an entirely different and much brighter picture. I'm telling you, it would have. And again, nothing against Mark, but Mark has a different style. Mark is not the greatest politician. That's not Mark Bedane's thing. Because Mark has this tendency to say these things that sometimes come off like, oh, hey, I know this and you don't. And it can be off-putting to the wrong people. There are a couple of times I personally know, not toward me, but I mean in general, where he's made that mistake. And the reason why I know how to recognize it is because sometimes I'm exactly the same damn way. That's why, okay? I like Mark. Sometimes you like a person because you have similarities, right? And that's one of them. We're both smart Alex. We both went to Cal. Dang it. So that's just the fact, Jack. But hey, Mark's gotten better, I think. And I've watched him grow considerably in this entire Las Vegas situation. That's the one thing about this is fun, is to watch people that you've known and have been acquainted with for a long, long time grow up. And that certainly, and I don't mean like grow up and I don't mean that in a derisive way. I just mean that Mark learned a lot on the fly, and he has performed very well. You got to give Mark Bedane props for what he's done. I know there's some people who don't want to. I know there's some people who used to be involved with the organization who are just, but you know what? I get both sides, okay? The person that I learned my NFL politics from was the great Raiders executive assistant, Al LaCasale. Al LaCasale taught me all the NFL politics I know. And what I mean by that is the NFL way. And I will tell you what the NFL way is to this day. It has been modified to some degree by society, but it still remains steadfast. The NFL is about loyalty. The NFL is about nicing you to death. The NFL is about politics. The NFL is about protocol. Give you a small example of what I'm talking about. When we were giving our Super Bowl bid presentation at the NFL Fall Owners Meeting in Atlanta in 2000, then NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue said to then Oakland Mayor Jerry Brown, Governor Brown, because Jerry was the governor of California. Of course, as you know, he became governor of California again. But Commissioner Tagliabue took it upon himself to make absolutely certain that Mayor Jerry Brown was referred to by the highest office he held. That is protocol. That is the way, the NFL way, okay? That's the NFL way. Now, Eric said that he wishes the NFL was about integrity. Well, I'll be honest with you. For me, the NFL is about integrity based on the way they've treated me, okay? Because I'm one of a handful of people in NFL history to be entrusted with the promotion of its key event brand, the Super Bowl. The NFL essentially took care of me and informed me when then Mayor Brown had some of his employees calling the NFL to ask them for answers to questions that the NFL knew I had already given them the answer to. They were trying to work behind my back for this reason. The city of Oakland was under Jerry Brown. Because at first, they didn't think I was going to go anywhere. They thought I was going to fail. Out of 11 cities, Oakland, on May 10th of 2000, was named one of 3 finalist cities with Jacksonville and Miami. And folks, to this day, I've had all kinds of people not quite tell the story. Not say, hey, you know what, it was Zinni that did it, except Monty. Even people on my committee would kind of diminish what I'd done, even though I created the whole doggone thing from scratch. No one gave us a chance. And what happened, and this is a lesson, anybody out there, if you do something that hits and becomes big, make absolutely certain you have a tight posse of people that you can trust. Talking about integrity, Eric, okay? The NFL was that tight posse for me because I had people in my own city trying to stab me in the back. You understand what I'm saying? Okay? So consider that. Consider, to this day, the NFL has allowed me to build my media brand around its events. Owners' meetings, NFL draft in particular, because I asked to cover that, and the then Executive Vice President of Government Affairs, Joe Brown, who had said when Jacksonville was being awarded the right to host the 2005 Super Bowl, Zinni, if there's anything we could do for you, let us know. I called him 2.5 years later. I reminded him of that, and he said, what can I do for you? I said, I want to cover the NFL draft. And he said, you're in. It was that simple. And I'm not a guy with a journalist background. I didn't go to school for that. I went to school to be an urban planner and an urban economist. I went to school to build cities. So I thought, hey, what kind of difference can I make in this kind of world? And I thought I can approach it from a tech perspective. So I would bring in, I was first to cover the NFL draft with a YouTube channel in 2006. Then I combined YouTube and Twitter in 2007. I brought in Ustream for live stream, and I worked with my buddy Bill Trackus, although we're not buddies anymore, but that's unfortunate, okay? And I've covered every NFL draft, save for one that I missed, the Dallas one, for personal reasons, okay? Since then. And that's because of the league. The league gave me a canvas upon which to paint my media business. You understand? So when you say integrity, I take issue with that. I take issue with that. Maybe you don't like how the NFL handled the Kaepernick situation, okay? Colin chose to handle things the way that he chose them. I'm not going to judge. But all I know is this. If the league, in its view, gives you a chance to do something, take the chance. Take the chance. You know, you can say, oh, I don't want to respect them or anything. It's a free country. But don't expect the league to turn around and say, oh, you know, okay, fine. Folks, that's not the way it works. The league is an institution. And as a person who's an institutionalist, okay, you have to understand when you build an institution, it becomes a system that survives beyond you. And that is where the NFL is right now. It is a system that has survived beyond its original creators. And so here Colin Kaepernick comes in and thinks he's going to disrupt that system in his way. No, the best way to affect change in the NFL is from within, to become part of, if you will, the home. To listen, to learn, to respect, and always suggest improvement. That's the way that you do it. Note, even in this case, with the league and the Raiders, there was one person I always sought to protect, and that person was Roger Goodell. And the reason I did was because when I gave my presentation to the Commissioner Tagliabue in 2000, the executive vice president of football operations was sitting right over there, and that was Roger Goodell. I was at the head table. Jerry came in 10 minutes late, and do you know the first thing he said? He walked in, and he looked at Paul, who was sitting over here, and said, what do you think about that cockamamie idea, talking about my plan for financing? And here I am heading the effort. I'm being honest, folks. Paul said, I think it's a great idea. So I have a number of instances, examples where the city of Oakland basically kicked me in the ass. You talk about integrity, okay? And the NFL said, hey, you know, why are you treating your guy like this? He's your guy. We had a rehearsal. I'm not going to mention the person's name. We're still friends to this day. He knew he was wrong. But he said, then I'm not going to read my doggone fooling lines. I'll be honest with you, I almost cried. And Jennifer Gonzalez and Sue Robachek were in the back of the room, the ballroom, and they said, Zinni, we feel for you. The NFL saw the city of Oakland treat me like shit. Okay? You hear what I'm saying? So that's why I defend the league. All right? Because the way I've been treated. Okay? Because I'm trying to build a business. Everybody has their objectives, but that's mine. My mom would always say, why don't you just ask him for a job? And I didn't for this reason, because I figured out a long time ago that there are some relationships best left at a distance, so that people, you don't know people too well, so that they get pissed off with you and you get pissed off with them and everything gets severed. Okay? I figured the best way to enjoy this relationship was to build my own business. And if you look around the league, if you ever have the opportunity to go to an owner's meeting, look around the people that are there. They're entrepreneurs. The NFL is a series of mom and pops. You have some very great and bright people that are there. People that you may have an opinion with if I say their names, like Jerry Jones. But I've said this before and I'll say this again. I like Jerry. That doesn't mean I like everything that he does. And this is something that each and every one of you must understand. okay? You must get to a point where maybe you don't like what a person does here and there, but don't, unless it's something really, really bad and you know how to determine that, don't just burn a bridge with them or have somebody to dislike because you perceive them as on a pedestal. I call that pedestal syndrome. Don't do that. Because you put yourself down here, and a lot of people do this when you perceive somebody else as up there. And sometimes someone can perceive somebody as too high up here, and they end up taking drastic actions that put them in places they don't want to be, or make them considered in ways that maybe they never intended to be. Don't be a loser, okay? Don't be that way. Be a person that understands how to develop relationships and how to say, okay, this person is my friend. And deal with that friendship. But don't get involved in somebody else's stuff unless that person is your friend and family and the other person does something to them that is really, truly bad, and you are smart enough to know what that is. But I'm saying this to you this way because a lot of people today don't know that difference in a social media environment. They get on Facebook, they write things, they say things. And that's why I refuse. I'll post something, but I'll just get back and I'm done. Because they are the modern examples of what I'm talking about you should not do. Don't do it. Now, Patrick M. Blackman, how you doing, man? And let's see here. Raider Lou says, Cowboy Wrestler says, oh, actually it's 10 championships. The third Raiders Super Bowl doesn't count. Raider Lou says, half that 1983 roster won in Oakland in 1980. And when I go to Oakland or Alameda, I see 3 trophies, not 2. So in my eyes, it's 11. Jamal Mills, how you doing, brother? We got to get together still, man. Patrick and Blackman says, peace, everybody. Raider Lou says, fair enough. Cowboy Wrestler says, fair enough to Raider Lou. Raider Lou says, the A's should have all 9 of their trophies at their headquarters, yet they only have 4. That's a great point. We need an Oakland Sports Hall of Fame. I mean a real one, not the one that's kind of encircled the Coliseum. We need a real one in a separate building that really has all of Oakland sports history, even things like, Tom Hanks selling popcorn, right, at the stadium, little things like that. That's all part of our history, okay? Eric Young says, Cowboy Wrestler, the third Raiders Super Bowl does count. Mostly Oakland Raiders players from the previous 2. That's a great point. Eric Young says, wish the NFL was about integrity. You heard what I had to say about that. Cowboy Wrestler says, at the end of the day, it's all about the mighty dollar. No, it's about family. Okay? However, within that, does the NFL take care of its retired players well? The answer is a big, fat no. The NFL knows it's really faltered in this. Okay, you talk to people like I talked to Kenny Easley at the Lee Steinberg Super Bowl party. He was livid because they get older and, hey, they deal with health issues. Yeah, players deal with health issues now. This issue is one that is the big, to me, the big giant scarlet letter in NFL history that's got to be addressed. And I mean right now. And I don't mean to imply the league isn't doing anything, but the league could do a lot more. And you would say, Zinni, what would you do? And I'm telling you, I would figure out a way to get each and every NFL alumni at least $1 million each. At least, okay? To make them whole. Start there and work your way up. Because you have a number of players suffering, sometimes physical ailments, sometimes mental, and sometimes to a point of their own detriment, particularly in this isolated society. The NFL needs to take care of its players that work for it. For example, there should never be at all any story about an NFL player getting into a fight with a 19-year-old girl in a hotel in Cleveland. Kareem Hunt. Okay? That was shameful. And that poor girl didn't know any better. She's 19, wanted to meet a football player, groupie. Hey, you know what? Millions before her. There'll be millions after. But does that mean that she has to go through something negative like that? No. So how should that be mitigated? The NFL should simply have its own dating network. Everybody is screened, players are counseled, players are monitored and chaperoned. Why? Because they're young. They don't know any better. You're giving these fellas, they're like, what, 20, 21, 22, 19, a lot of money without the wisdom to go with it. And then what happens is something goes wrong, and it's something the player is written about as if this team had nothing to do with it, and neither did the league. That's wrong. The league must recognize that each player represents the shield. And so it has to take care of that player. It has to chaperone that player. It has to coddle that player. It has to give that player a womb for the time that the NFL employs that player, even as a free agent, until that player retires. Okay? And it should be a tier system. And Ray Lou says 72-74, the A's won their 3, and 75, the Warriors won their first, and 76, the Raiders won their first. That's 5 straight championships. If I include the 80s, that makes 6 championships in 9 years. It's a great era. And that's why, Raider Lou, we need a true Oakland Sports Hall of Fame. And you know what? We need to start talking about where they should go, its design, how much it costs, how much money needs to be raised. That should be the next project before anything else. Teams or whatever, we need a place because we don't have it. We need one magical place that celebrates the glorious and extremely, not just rich, but extremely rich Oakland sports history. Yeah, I think so. Cowboy Wrestler 70s, 80s was a great time for Bay Area sports. But Cowboy Wrestler, we just had the, 5 years of Warrior greatness. We're just going to forget? We need an Oakland Sports Hall of Fame. I repeat, we need an Oakland Sports Hall of Fame. Now I mean just the Hall of Fame where we just have, plaques here for this person or that person. But I mean a place that serves as, for want of a better term, a repository of the culture within which the sports greatness was established. Okay? I mean, think about it. It could be cool, like you have this animatronics. Hey, how about an audio animatronics version of Al Davis, right? You get Disney involved, something like that. How about an audio animatronics of the owner of the A's? I'm thinking Charlie Finley, right? Or you could have a lot of fun with it. You could have I was thinking about not just pro sports, but also college sports. We have Cal and Stanford, right? You could have kind of these wax figures of people like number of greats, Cal gymnasts, the 1992 women's gymnastic champions, among others. There's so much So much that's rich. Can have a celebration of women who played football in Oakland who you never heard of. I interviewed in '93. I'm not kidding you. Okay. Rugby. There's a lot there. Really is. Okay. And Raider Lou says, what made you stick with the Raiders when they moved the first time? Raider Lou was family. Again, the fact that, yeah, they were in LA, but also I was in college at UTA, but so it gave me some distance, right? But the simple fact of the matter is people that I grew up with, like me, who went to Allendale Elementary, Bret Hart Junior High, which is now middle school, Skyline High School, all of those folks, uh, my friends, were part of that family atmosphere, which the Raiders were important too, and very much a part of as well. So that's what did it. That was easy, easy. We always had a memory or something. Somebody met their girlfriend or wife or did something under those bleachers, and because before the Raiders came back, they had these bleachers, right? And excuse me, all kinds of stuff went on under those bleachers. I'm telling you, people have stories. Oh my goodness. So there were a lot of people who were very angry when Mount Davis got built because they felt like their little playground was going to be, gone. Okay. Cowboy Wrestler says when San Francisco's teams were basically doormats in their respective leagues, Oakland teams were winning championships left and right. Yeah, that's right. Hey, folks, it is 104 here in the East, and I'm going to start winding this down. And I'll be back tomorrow. And we'll talk about the Heisman. And, I might try a part 2 here. I think we got something going. Well, there's a lot to talk about. But remember that Oakland is a special place. It is a big, small town. And it always will be. It always will be. At least as long as I'm alive. I think the only way Oakland would change its fabric is if it were to add 200,000 more people. Cowboy Rush says, who wins the Heisman? That's Joe Burrow. That's slam dunk. Dude's having an off the charts year. It's going to be interesting tomorrow. Then we could talk about his NFL future after that. I got to start doing my mock draft. All right, folks. Live long and prosper. And rest in peace, Rene Auberjonois of Star Trek. And rest in peace, Danny Aiello of Do the Right Thing. Great actor. A great part of American culture. I had to do a separate just commentary on the greatness of Danny Aiello. Hey, Jamal, I did say Bret Hart. Yeah, Bret Hart, man. 1975 to 1978. Bret Hart, man. Bret Hart Junior High. That's right. All right. Don't fight the power. Be the power. Everybody says fight the power. No. Be the power. Be the power. See you all later. Talk to you. David, you're late to the party, but